Low situational awareness. Some habits don't require a psychology textbook to spot. You see them every day. Take people who move through the world as if no one else exists. The driver who camps in the fast lane going 10 under, oblivious to the mile-long line of cars stacking up in frustration. The ones who stop in the middle of a doorway to check their phone, forcing everyone else to shuffle awkwardly around them. And then there are the ones who carry on loud phone conversations in public like they're the star of a one-person show. On the surface, this looks like simple rudeness, but it often reflects something deeper: low situational awareness, which is the ability to notice and interpret what's happening around you. Psychologists sometimes call this social cognition. It's the mental skill that lets you read the room, recognize when you're in someone's way, or adjust your behavior to match the environment. People with weaker cognitive flexibility, the ability to shift perspective, often fail at this. They don't connect their small choices to the larger situation, which makes them seem careless, entitled, or just plain inconsiderate. Smarter minds pick up on subtle cues, anticipate how their actions affect others, and self-correct quickly. People who don't, like the ones holding full-blown phone calls in a public restroom while everyone else is just trying to keep some dignity, show they're missing a fundamental part of awareness, recognizing that the world doesn't revolve around them.
Drama seeking.
Life brings enough conflict on its own, yet some people seem to manufacture it wherever they go. They stir up fights in group chats, escalate minor disagreements into full-scale arguments, or retell stories in ways that fan the flames. Instead of solving problems, they multiply them, because chaos gives them attention. Psychologists link this behavior to low emotional regulation. People who can't manage their impulses or tolerate boredom often create conflict as a kind of stimulation. It's easier to light fires than to sit with quiet. Over time, this constant drama chasing erodes trust, because others learn they're less interested in resolution than in performance. What often goes unnoticed is how this behavior hijacks thinking itself. When the mind is constantly occupied with conflict, there's little bandwidth left for reflection, planning, or problem solving. Drama doesn't just waste time. It crowds out the mental space intelligence depends on.
Poor listening habits.
We all know that person who interrupts before you finished your thought, nods along while rehearsing their reply, and asks questions that prove they weren't listening the first time. That's the hallmark of a poor listener, someone who dominates conversations, talking far more than they take in. It's not just rude, it's a sign they're running on autopilot rather than actually engaging. Cognitive scientists describe listening as an active skill. Your brain isn't just taking in words, it's decoding tone, context, and intent. That takes working memory and attention, both of which are tied closely to reasoning ability. When someone keeps cutting people off or misses key details, it often points to weak executive function, difficulty holding multiple streams of information in mind at once. When those skills break down, listening stops being a tool for clarity and turns into a source of errors. Misheard details get carried forward as if they were accurate, and decisions end up resting on shaky input. At its core, poor listening is less about bad manners and more about limited thinking.
Immediate gratification.
One of the clearest signs of intelligence is the ability to delay gratification, to resist a small reward now for a bigger one later. Psychologists proved this decades ago in the famous marshmallow experiment, where children were given a choice: eat one marshmallow immediately or wait 15 minutes and get two. The kids who could hold out weren't just showing patience. Later in life, they scored higher on tests and achieved more. Delayed gratification tracks directly with cognitive control. That same principle plays out in everyday life. Someone who buys the latest phone on credit, knowing they can't afford it, is showing the same lack of foresight as the child who couldn't wait. Adults just mask it with bigger stakes, draining savings for impulse purchases, eating in ways that sabotage their health, or abandoning projects as soon as the initial excitement fades. Each choice trades away the future for a fleeting reward in the present. The habit may look like simple lack of willpower, but it points to something more: an inability to think ahead. Intelligence isn't just solving puzzles or memorizing facts. It's being able to imagine the consequences of your choices. People who can't pause for that step stay locked in a cycle of chasing the immediate and paying for it later. Surface reading. Scroll through any comment section and you'll find people arguing furiously about articles they never actually read. The headline alone becomes their entire knowledge base. Nuance? Context? Buried somewhere in paragraph 3, untouched. It's like trying to review a movie after only watching the trailer. The danger is obvious. Headlines are designed to grab attention, not explain complexity. They compress, distort, and exaggerate. Someone who stops there ends up with a caricature of reality, bold claims with none of the fine print. That shallow intake bleeds into conversation, where they parrot slogans instead of ideas and recycle outrage instead of insight. Information overload isn't the problem here. The problem is stopping at the surface. Intelligence requires critical thinking, the ability to go past the headline, weigh evidence, compare perspectives, and make sense of context. Without that step, people mistake recognition for knowledge, and thought stays superficial and hollow. No sense of humor. Everyone knows a Karen who can turn a harmless joke into a full-blown incident report. Sarcasm? Offensive. Satire? Disrespectful. A playful jab among friends? Grounds for a lecture about professionalism. It's not that humor flies over their heads, it lands right on them, and they immediately call the manager. This habit ties into cognitive flexibility and theory of mind, the mental skills that let you hold two meanings at once, recognize when someone's play acting, and see another person's perspective. Understanding most jokes requires detecting an incongruity, what's expected versus what's said, and then mentally resolving it. Research in humor and cognition repeatedly finds that people who appreciate complex, ironic humor also score higher on verbal reasoning and perspective-taking measures. When someone consistently misses those cues or responds with anger, it often reflects a rigidity in processing. Literal, single track, and quick to take offense, rather than exploring possible meanings. Humor works as a kind of stress test for intelligence. If you can catch the layers of meaning, you can probably handle complex ideas too. People who never laugh and go straight to anger show the opposite pattern, rigid, narrow, and quick to miss the bigger picture. It's not comedy they're rejecting, it's the mental flexibility that comedy demands. All talk, no action. Some people can talk a big game about everything they're going to do, and then never lift a finger. They can outline grand plans, promise the moon, and deliver a 2-hour speech on their next impressive venture, only for all of it to evaporate the moment action is required. It's a bit like those folks who buy running shoes and never take them out of the box. They love the idea of effort, but not the reality. Maybe they think if they just talk enough, they'll magically burn calories from all that verbal exercise. Psychologists describe this as the gap between intention and execution. Talking about goals can create the illusion of progress, because saying it out loud tricks the brain into feeling it's already underway. That's why people who only talk often overestimate what they've achieved. What marks intelligence isn't the promise of action, but the ability to deliver it. Smarter thinking means recognizing talk is cheap. Action is where intelligence cashes out. Arrogance without understanding. Bragging is often used to cover up a lack of real knowledge. You'll hear it when someone delivers sweeping opinions on politics they barely follow, or boast that a complex issue is just common sense. It's a way to sound certain while skipping the details. From there, it's a short step to mocking. Rather than asking questions, they use ridicule as a shield. It's easier to sneer at something you don't understand than to admit you're unsure. The deeper issue is that this habit shows a lack of intellectual humility. Studies in cognitive psychology have found that humility correlates with higher reasoning ability. It means being aware of what you don't know and staying open to new information. People who brag or mock instead of asking questions demonstrate the opposite. They close the door on learning. Instead of bragging, real intelligence shows up in curiosity, in asking questions, in knowing when to withhold judgment. You can tell the difference instantly. The person who fills silence with noise versus the one who pauses to think before speaking. Chronic sleep neglect. You can fake being fine on 4 hours of sleep for a day or two. Push it longer, and the cracks start to show. Reaction time slow, memory falters, even basic reasoning takes more effort. Psychologists have compared the cognitive effects of sleep deprivation to being mildly drunk. You may still function, but you don't function well. Research from the University of Pennsylvania found that people with 6 or less hours of sleep a night for 2 weeks performed as poorly on attention and reasoning tasks as those who went 2 straight nights without sleep. What's worse, most participants thought they were doing fine. They had no idea how impaired they'd become. It's crazy how some people brag about running on empty, as if exhaustion proves their ambition. In reality, it's the opposite. Sleep deprivation undercuts the very intelligence they're trying to project. Ego fragility. Some people treat every disagreement like it's a threat to their very existence. If they're wrong, they can't admit it. If something goes badly, they find someone to blame. The pattern is simple. When things go right, they take all the credit, and when things don't, suddenly it's someone else's fault. This habit goes deeper than arrogance. It's about fragility. A fragile ego can't handle the idea of being wrong, because being wrong feels like being lesser. That's why these people argue endlessly over trivial details, twist facts to fit their version of reality, or blame anyone else when things don't go as planned. Psychologists call this externalization, pushing responsibility outward so the ego doesn't take the hit. Intelligence depends on the ability to revise your view when reality proves you wrong. Fragile egos won't do that. They'd rather protect their pride than update their understanding. The result is a pattern of repeating the same mistakes, all while believing they're in the right.
Rigid thinking.
A software update rolls out, and they complain the company ruined everything. The grocery store rearranges its aisles, and they grumble that shopping is now impossible. Their partner suggests a new place to eat, and they refuse before even hearing what's on the menu. However small the change, the reaction is the same: resistance at all costs. Psychologists link this to cognitive rigidity, or the inability to adjust when conditions change. Studies in problem solving show that flexible thinkers try new approaches when the old one fails, but rigid thinkers keep using the same broken strategy, expecting it to work differently. That isn't persistence, it's blindness to feedback. Intelligence relies on mental flexibility, the capacity to shift perspective, absorb new information, and see alternatives beyond the first idea. Without that flexibility, thinking stalls. Rigid minds don't just resist change, they shrink the range of what they can understand. Each refusal to adapt narrows their perspective further, leaving them stuck in place while the world moves on without them. Boredom, intolerance. Some people can't handle a single moment of boredom. The instant there's a lull, they reach for their phones, binge endless videos, or drown out silence with any distraction they can find. That constant need to fill the quiet shows they can't sit with their own thoughts for even a minute. Research suggests that the ability to tolerate boredom is tied to maintaining focus. If you can't handle a bit of boredom, you never give your mind the space to settle into real concentration. That means you get really good at jumping from one quick distraction to the next, and really bad at sustaining any deeper thought. True intelligence requires the ability to stay with a complex idea long enough to understand it. If you can't bear a moment of boredom, you never get that chance. Gut feeling bias. There are folks out there who trust their instincts so much that they'll happily toss out a mountain of evidence just because it doesn't feel right. They'll say things like, "I know what the numbers show, but I just have a gut feeling this is wrong," as if intuition is some magical trump card that beats actual data. In reality, leaning too hard on gut instinct can mean ignoring facts that don't fit a comfortable narrative. It's a bit like covering your ears because you don't like the song that's playing. Sure, it's cozier to go with what feels right, but it can lead to some pretty shaky decisions. Smart thinking isn't about having a perfect crystal ball. It's about being willing to adjust your viewpoint when the evidence says you should. People who rely solely on gut feelings might sound confident, but they're often just dodging the hard work of thinking critically. All of these habits say a lot about how people think. Which one do you notice the most? And which relative is guilty of it? Drop a comment below.